Hi, so we are live. Hi, everybody. My name is Manan Puri, and I'm the co-founder of Strategy for GMAT. We provide end-to-end admission consulting services for the top B schools and MS programs across the globe. We have a team of alums who have graduated from these schools, so they've been in your shoes before, and they now guide you towards your dream B schools or dream master's programs. And today we are specifically talking about ISB and the entire interview process of the school in terms of how it goes, whatever you need to do to prepare, how you should prepare, do's and don'ts, etc. We'll cover a whole list of topics. And I have with me Abhishek Chavla, who's joining us from Delhi, and he's also an ISB alum. And we are waiting for one more alum who'll join in a bit, but we'll get started. So, for a start, Abhishek, why don't you give everybody your introduction?
Sure. Thanks, Manan, and hi everyone. As Manan mentioned, my name is Abhishek, and I am an ISB alum from the class of 2016. I'm currently working as an assistant director with EY Parthenon, and I've also taken ISB interviews in the past. So I've been there, done that, been on both sides of the table. And yeah, very excited to be here today and share my thoughts on the interview process and my experiences with all of you. So looking forward to the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Abhishek. Umang is here. Umang, hi. Could you just quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm Umang. I'm currently working at Microsoft as a product manager. Prior to that, I was at Nika as a product manager as well. I'm an ISB alum of class of 21. I graduated from the Hyderabad campus. And parallelly, I've been associated with strategy for GMAT since few years now. And I really love to mentor students. And it's been phenomenal to be on this side and help students. So that's mostly about me.
Thank you, Umang, for taking out time. And so let's get started. First of all, sorry to those or 2 minute silence for people who were thinking that they'll party and go watch India bat in the evening outside. But thanks to Sri Lanka's brilliant performance, we are here and we can focus solely on the session. So let's start off with the admissions process effectively, and so we essentially would look at a few things here, right? So first of all, for round one, the deadline was, as we all know, 10th of September, and a lot of people now think and are in the mode of when will my calls come, what is the timeline, etc., etc. So broadly, based on what we know as alums, the offline interviews will start from the 30th of September and they will go on till the 15th. And 15th will also be online interview day for people who cannot join offline, or they can, who are outside India and cannot make it to the offline interviews. Uh, and these would be spread across locations: Delhi, Mumbai, Calcutta, and Hyderabad campus, of course. Bangalore, surprisingly, we have not got a slot yet, but we'll know for sure. But just a disclaimer: this is as per the list that we alums have received to volunteer. Of course, we don't, take live interviews, but that's the list that we got. So if we go by that logic, by 25th at max, you should start receiving your calls. Based on the previous years, the calls are rolled out in bulk. So few people would get, let's say, 5 days to prepare. Few people might get 10 days to prepare. Those who have their interviews on the 7th or 8th. Now, you might say there's an advantage to few and a disadvantage to others, and that's why things are what they are. So hence, you need to get started as early as possible and start preparing. The second part is around, generally who gets the calls and how the calls are coming in. So you would have started receiving, verification mails that your profile is complete, etc. Again, there is no pattern to it, in the sense that ISB allots certain number of applications to each admissions member, and as soon as they keep on completing it, the ISB sends out the verification mail. This is not a reflection of your candidature. This is not a reflection of how good your application is, or for that matter, when you've submitted the application. All right. And in terms of locations, as I said, there are 4 5 right now. It also could mean that you're opted for a, let's say, a Delhi location. You might still go for an online interview because the slots might be full that week, or ISB might roll out more slots for the rest of October or early November. It could be all possible. So, in case you've not received a call in the first lot, do not worry about it. Okay. The interview itself is typically, if it's online or offline, ideally it would be having 2 or 3 alums at max. Uh, these alums would have graduated at least either in 2020 or 2021 or before. So ISB gives a 2 3 year window for the alums to graduate, go into the industry, learn nuances, and then they feel you're ready to select future cohort members, or for that matter, go to resume reviews and other sessions for the current class itself. All right. Um, and these 2 or 3 alums might or might not be from your background. Because again, from past experience, ISB does try to do that, but there are a lot of last minute cancellations. So at the end, whoever can make it, they comprise of the pool. So it might not be the case that if you have opted for consulting, there'll be somebody sitting there from McKinsey. All right. It could be there, could be a product manager there. Hence, it's important for you to, I won't call it dumb down, but simplify your achievements and profile in a way that anybody can understand. The same thing we would say for the application prep as well. All right. So that's the broad structure, or the way it is laid out. Now I'll transfer this to Abhishek to talk about what exactly is ISB looking for in terms of the interview criteria, and how you should look at the various criteria that ISB looks for in general. Okay, so it's a two-part process. What exactly it is and how should you view it? Okay. So Abhishek, over to you.
Sure, sure. Thanks, Manan. See, I think, I mean, obviously, I cannot talk about the exact criteria that ISB looks at, right? I mean, I still love the school a lot, and hence my my comments would be more a reflection of what generally they would look at, right? And I think they are generally looking for a few things. One is uh, good communication skills for sure. If you cannot communicate well and cannot articulate your thoughts, I don't think they would prefer such people, because even in the in the 1 year program, you have to communicate a lot. You have to participate in classroom discussions, in your study groups. If you're leading a club, you're discussing your club activities, or other sessions or events, etc. Secondly, I think leadership potential is a big one, and probably that should have been my point number one. But leadership potential is something that they look for, because they're eventually looking for people to become future leaders, right? It's generally said that at ISB you are a student for a year but an alum for life, and that is what they're looking at. Will this person be a good student and a good or even better alum in the future, and does he or she have leadership potential to go ahead and lead in their respective chosen fields? So I think that's the second thing, or probably the first thing I should have said. Thirdly, I think it's very important for them to understand whether this person would fit into the class or not. And you may have great academic records, you may come from the top undergrad schools in the country or even abroad, you may have high GMAT scores, etc. as well. But if you do not fit into the class, then the people on the other side of the table who are alumni themselves and have been in your shoes as well, have seen the 1 year at ISB and life post that, they might not necessarily feel confident recommending you to the school. See, eventually it's a recommendation that the panel would give to the school, and there's a rating and a recommendation, and then the school would add up your interview performance to the other criteria that they look at before they would extend you an offer. So I think these are a few things that they look at in an interview. Obviously, depending upon the panel and depending upon the conversation, there could be other things as well. But broadly, I think these are a few things that they would be considering.
Right. Thanks, Abhishek. And more importantly, I think it's about being yourself at the end of the day. While they will be evaluating you in these criteria, a lot of it is essentially what you already have, or what you already have put in the application. So it's all about just presenting it well. All right. Research about goals and other things. Okay. So, Umang, if I were to ask you, the do's and don'ts while preparing for the ISB interviews, uh, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the do's and don'ts, like very basic do's and don'ts, do's definitely go through your application in very, very detail and depth, because there can be no scope of mismatch, and you cannot forget what you wrote in your application in terms of any project or even the impact that you created in a project. Number two, in do, as Abhishek also mentioned, they want to hear clarity of thought that you bring to the table. They want to hear that in good communication skills. So you cannot at that point be very vague in terms of, I'm not very clear of what my long term goal is, etc. You cannot have that. So it's essentially very, very absolute to be very clear in terms of what you want to do and what your goals are. So these are, I think, the top two do's which are there for me, because if these do not go well, I think it's a very big red flag in a candidate's interview. In terms of don't, I feel some people, because we keep hearing that ISB is a conversational interview, so some people tend to take it a little in a little informal way as well. So that is, I think, must not do at all sort of situation for me. It is, you have to sort of strike the right balance between formal as well as informal. At the end of the day, you're still being interviewed in a very professional sense, so you have to sort of maintain that element as well. Dress very formally, be there before time, basic elements of that should be there. I think one more must not do a very nitpick, but some people also end up calling the alums or the people on the panel sir, ma'am. I think that's also a not do, because it does not resonate well. Because again, it's a corporate sort of setup, so avoid saying sir, ma'am sort of things as well. And just a last thing, as I said, also covered in the first do, but there can absolutely be no mismatch between what has been written and what you're now saying. So again, a very strong do not do anything or do not say anything which does not match to what you've been submitted. Even if you would want to do something differently, at least till the interview, maintain that you are on sync with what was submitted in the application. So those are my top do's and don'ts for the interview.
Okay. Abhishek, do you want to add to this list?
Uh, I'd not really add to the list. I think Umang's pretty much covered it. I think I'll give an example to just substantiate what she said. And this happened with me about 3 years ago when I was taking an ISB interview. And uh, that person was from an edtech background. And he had mentioned in his essays that his long term goal is to start up in the edtech space. Now, I asked a very simple question, and the question was, okay, which segment would you want to focus on? Will it be a K 12, test prep, higher education, upskilling, etc.? Right? Which segment would you want to venture into? And that guy had no clue. I mean, he was like, okay, let me think. So, guys, we understand that it's long term goals and we're talking about 10 years in the future or whatever, but you cannot just superficially write that, oh, I want to start up on my own, and have no idea of what you want to get into. And sure, things change, people change, and trends change, and you might not end up doing what you thought of, but you at least need to have some idea and some clarity on what your goals are, right? So like Umang mentioned, you need to have some direction at least, right? So even if he would have said that, okay, I want to get into upskilling or I want to get into test prep, I would have been fine. But if in the interview you are thinking about your long term goals, that just tells me that you haven't thought them through, and that is where the problem lies. I think like Umang mentioned, it's very, very important to go through your application thoroughly, know each and every word on it, because people can pick up anything. I mean, I've been on the panel, and people have asked questions based on even a paragraph or even a couple of sentences in the essay, and somehow candidates do not know much detail about that. So I think being thorough with your application stands out and has to be the number one thing you do in terms of your interview preparation.
Yeah, because if they feel that you're not thorough, that means you've not written it yourself, which is a much, much bigger red flag. So make sure you do that, even if you've got them written for somebody else, which is a sin in any case, but still. I'll just touch upon one more thing here in terms of when Abhishek said that they might nitpick because panelists get, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes between interviews to go through your application. They do not have receive it a day in advance or anything else, right? So they might glance things through, they might read the application during the interview as well, and they pick up anything. For instance, a couple of years back, there was a candidate, he graduated from ISB, I think last year. Yash Sangvi is his name, and he had mentioned that he had backpacked to 15 countries in Europe. Okay, now the alum basically asked him to name those 15 countries in his hobbies. Now people might think hobbies is a not that big a section. It can be anything that I write there, but alums just want to test out whether you've paid attention to the entire application form or not, and that's a lesson for the R2 or R3 applicants as well. Make sure that all application sections are important, not just the essays. All right. Final thing I would say is that do is practice, because nothing substitutes that. I'm not, and you could reach out to an admissions consultant. Of course, we are here to help. You could reach out to alum friends who are there in your network. You could reach out to anybody senior as well who might or might not be from ISB. An alum would definitely be preferred because they know the nuances of the school and pre and post MBA. But practice is very important, because a lot of who are in your jobs for 3 to 4 years, you might not have given interviews for that amount of time. And like Oman said, contrary to popular belief, yes, they are conversational interviews, but they are not a chat with friends, where you can go unstructured and those kind of things. And in fact, the interviews are such that they are so conversational, you might not even get whether you did well or not. Okay, and it might be a stress interview where they cross question, but that's the only way they're trying to know you, inside out, and know your preferences a lot deeper than that. All right. So these are the broad do's and don'ts, and of course, through the questions that we have received so far and the ones that you are asking, and we'll cover them in a bit, we will cover a lot of other aspects. Now let us talk about
Manan, before
interview
you,
yeah.
sorry, Manan, before you move on, I think one don't which I would want to share with everybody is don't try to impress the panel.
Yeah.
I think everybody probably thinks, or a lot of people probably think that, okay, if I can impress the panel, I am through. And like Manan said, for a lot of us on the other side of the table, we might not even react, but we'll get to know कि यार ये ना बहुत overkill कर रहा है या बहुत impress करने की कोशिश कर रहा है. तो ठीक है, चलो, let's go with the flow, let's take the ride. But eventually, once you go out of the room, the panel would discuss that कि यार मुझे लगता नहीं है कि ये सच में ऐसा सोचता है या ऐसा बोल रहा था, तो ऐसा ही है, and all of that, right? Uh, and hence it's very important to be yourself and not try to impress. Don't say something just because you think it will look good or the panel would be impressed. Say something because you truly believe in that and you have points to substantiate your beliefs. So I think
Yeah.
that's a very important don't try to impress the panel at all.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Moving on, and let us talk about your own interview experiences. And each interview experience, as you'll see, when we talk about ours, will be different. So let's talk about Abhishek, your ISB interview when it happened in 2015 or early 2016. I think it was round two for you. But yeah,
2014,
go on.
2014 it was.
Yeah,
So, someone, and it was 2014, and it was very interesting because I had a Saturday interview 10 a.m. So it was the first slot, uh, and I just happened to be working till like 2 a.m. the previous night, so I was a little sleep deprived. And then my interview was on the other end of the city. I was in Mumbai in those days, and I had to travel like 35 kilometers to be at that venue. Now I went there, and then uh, first interviews, obviously I was thinking that people would come hard at me. They'll be fresh, and they would have had their coffee and all, and they'll be like, okay, ये first candidate है, इसके साथ थोड़ा let's have a good conversation. But honestly, I think they made me very comfortable. There were three people on the panel. I think many of them were pretty senior. So I think there were people from 2004, 2008 kind of time frames, and this was in 2014. So 6-7 years out. of ISB, and I think it was very conversation like. They asked me about my background, they asked me about the kind of work I'd done, etc. Uh, and then one question which I was not necessarily prepared for was around the most significant achievement of my life so far. And I specifically asked them if I could talk about things outside of work, to which they were absolutely fine. And then I spoke about an initiative that I'd taken in my school days, simply because I thought the impact of that initiative was much more than what I'd done in a project at work, etc. And I think it really landed very well with them because I could showcase the impact to thousands of people of a social initiative that I'd taken. And then they asked me that last question, which is, "Do you have any question for us?" And I was in a way taken aback because it was just about 20 minutes into the conversation, and I knew that okay, now this is going to be the last question, right? Because this is how it usually ends. Um, एंड देन आई वाज लाइक अच्छा 20 मिनट में ये क्वेश्चन आ गया मतलब या तो बहुत अच्छा गया है या बहुत खराब गया है एंड दे जस्ट वांट टू जस्ट एंड द कन्वर्सेशन हियर बट आई आस्क्ड देम अ क्वेश्चन व्हिच आई हैड थॉट ऑफ and they seem to be fine with it. They explained what I'd asked them for, and then it was a good quick 20 minutes conversation. So I was actually प्रिटी कॉन्फिडेंट कि अच्छा गया है, ऐसा कोई रेड फ्लैग मुझे लग नहीं रहा था, तो मुझे काफ़ी कॉन्फिडेंस था. बट ऑन दी अदर हैंड मुझे ये भी पता था कि ये लोग बताएंगे नहीं या दिखाएंगे नहीं कि आप अच्छा नहीं कर रहे हो. सो इट कैन गो आइदर वे, स्पेशली इफ इट इज अ 20-minute kind of a thing, because from what I know and what I've experienced, it's usually 30 to 40 minutes on average. But yeah, 20-minute thing he was like, okay, या तो बहुत ही अच्छा गया है बहुत बेकार गया है, but thankfully it went well and everything fell in place.
Right, Abhishek. Yeah, I do remember that entire experience. Uh, cool. Umang,
So
how was
yeah,
it for you?
Manan remembers because Manan was not in the room, but I called up Manan right after the interview, and that is
Yeah.
why.
Okay.
Yeah.
Umang, what about you?
So I think I gave the interview in 2020. So 2020 again, round two applicant. So my interview was a mix. So it started on a very conversational note, wherein they asked about my introduction in terms of what I currently do, where am I based out of, and I was actually the first candidate to give interview on that day, and it happened to be a very very cold day in Delhi winters. So I was the first person, so the panel was also sort of settling in at that point of time. So we had some chats in terms of it's so early and Delhi weather and general sort of chit chat as well. So it started on that conversational tone. However, slowly and steadily, it started taking very serious turns, wherein they asked about the previous work I had done, and they went very, very in depth about a project which I had written in my application. They asked me to explain it in a lot of details. They asked a lot of questions around it. So it was quite a in-depth sort of conversation that we had. After that, they also asked me some behavioral sort of questions that I was coming with around 1 year of experience in product management and 3 years in analytics. So they said that you might be in a situation at ISB wherein your peers are coming with more experience in product management and they might force their opinions in certain group discussions. So how would you cope up with that, or how do you manage that? How do you deal with such situations? So they were trying to assess my behavior, or what I would do in those situations at ISB. So that was, I think, mostly about around 20 minutes of my interview sort of went in that. After which they threw a case study at me, which sort of was a very, very. I had practiced a lot of product management case studies, but the one they did threw at me was very, very unexpected and quite, it took me a little time to sort of answer that. But they actually asked me, if you think about ISB application process as a product in itself, how would you improve that, and as a product manager, and how do you identify the problems in that particular aspect? Now the problem here was you cannot just answer it in a very honest manner, because at the end of the day you also have to be very diplomatic because you are sitting for that interview. So I had to answer that, and plus they also gave me, like, I was very aware that they were timing, or they were sort of noting the time that I took to think about it as well. So while I did take some time to think about, they were cognizant of how much time I'm taking. So there was sort of a subtle pressure of me on me to answer it as well. But I think for product management enthusiasts, case studies are something which are given very typically. Now, in my case, ISB itself was presented as a case study. So that's again something that you can prepare about. But this was followed by typical, any questions for us sort of question. And all in all, I was not able to gauge from their expressions at all as to, whether it was a good or a bad interview. But because I was still, I would say it was a mix of conversation as well as stress test as well as informal. It was mix of all of these things for me. So at the end, I left with an okayish feeling that it went okay, but I was not able to tell as to, whether I'll make it or not. There was no such insight on that. But all in all, I think my interview lasted for good 40-45 minutes is the duration of how long my interview was.
Right. Thanks, Umang. Abhishek, there was a question. Did they dig deep into your application in your interview?
Yeah, so they did ask me about my career goals, and I did mention consulting back then, and good to see that, yeah, now I am in consulting. But yeah, uh, I was also expecting them to ask me a case study after that question, because generally when you say that your goal is consulting, they generally would ask a consulting kind of a case or a guesstimate to test your problem solving abilities. But I was lucky probably that I was not asked a case study, and then I didn't really have to go down that path. But yeah, there were questions around my application, especially around my goals. But I think that they were fine with my answer and didn't really go deeper into them.
Right. Okay. So talking about my experience very briefly, first of all, it was on my birthday. So that was a good icebreaker because they had seen the date of birth on my form, and it was all pleasant start. And then seriousness started, like in Umang's case as well. They delved deeper into the work that I did for my firm. That was back then, into KPO as or knowledge process outsourcing, and I was more into private equity research. So they would even, they even asked me about what are the sort of revenues that your firm has, even though I was still quote unquote in the back office in Gurgaon. Whereas the firm was based out of the US, they were asking about the revenue models and things like that. So the important thing is for the companies that you're a part of, just do a bit more research around that. The second part was more around, like in Abhishek's case, what is the biggest achievement? And for me as well, it was the same achievement because Abhishek and I, back in school, right after school, we created our school's alumni association, and we co-founded that, and it was for me that biggest achievement. And I think for Abhishek back then as well, it was the same. And then I had also talked about, stock market trading in my application, and then the alum asked me about, how do you trade? Do you do fundamental analysis or technical? I said I focus more on technical analysis because I used to read charts back then. Then he asked me to draw a pattern on a paper, and thankfully, because I was doing it, I was prepared for it and it drew that. I think that's when the panel was impressed because they thought that I might not, be able to draw it and answer the second or third level questions. Uh, the expression, I could gauge that yeah, they're impressed about it, but again, you never know at the end. So and then finally it was more about the kind of contributions I would make to ISB. So for me it was not going deep into one area, it was bits and pieces across two or three areas. Whereas let's see, for Abhishek and Umang, they went deep into one areas and they touched upon the others. The duration for Abhishek was about 25 minutes or 20 minutes. Umang was about 40-45 minutes. For me, it was about 30-35 minutes. So clearly, the duration does not matter. Even if it's an hour long discussion or if it's a 15-minute discussion, there is nothing that you can gauge from that whether your candidature is good or not. Okay. And then it ended with whatever questions you have for the panel. And I think Abhishek and Umang, I would want your opinion on it. When and in our team also we debate a lot in terms of what is the right set of questions to ask. Should you even ask that question or not? What are your opinions in terms of if they ask any questions for us at the end? Abhishek?
Okay. Thanks, Manan. And yeah, I do remember you calling me back after your interview as well. And yeah, those are good fond memories. Okay, coming back. So I think a question is a good question for the panel if it meets two criteria in my view. I think the first criteria is it something that will have a direct impact or a significant impact on your experience at the school? Okay, don't ask about stuff which is like kuch farak nahi padta usse. Like, I mean, a lot of people say, okay, can I ask them about their experience while at ISB? How does it matter? Right, it doesn't matter. It should, your question should be a question which will have a significant impact on your experience at the school. Secondly, it should not be something which is available on the website or any other forum, because then that will tell the panel that you haven't done your research. So I think it's very important that these two criteria are met in my view. That would make for a good question. It could be anything. It could be about academics, about extracurriculars, about placements, about exchange programs, could be anything. But in my view, these two criteria are things that it should be meeting, because if it is not significant, it doesn't matter. And hence you are wasting that opportunity that the school is giving you to ask that question. And probably that's the only opportunity you get. And secondly, if it's right there on the website or आपने नहीं देखा है, तो it doesn't come across well and tells them that you haven't really done your homework, right? So that's what I would say.
Right. Thanks, Abhishek. Umang, your thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree to Abhishek, right? So I have had multiple instances wherein candidates just ask that, how has your experience been at ISB? And for me, that just reflects lack of effort. It just reflects a sense of being taken for granted in terms of the interview, because this you could have asked me in a very informal setting over a phone call. You have 100 ways to reach out to an alum via LinkedIn or any other platform, right? So why do you want to waste this opportunity that has been given to you and ask such a redundant question? And this question again will have no bearing on your experience at ISB. So what is this question going to help, or what is this question going to solve for you, is something which is very, very unclear. So I also believe that this question should reflect your research about the college. You should talk about something which was not easily available, or which you did not get straight answers from when you tried and asked alums about it. Build something on those lines and ask a question which helps you in that journey, and also not just you, but can also prove to be beneficial for the peer group or the community of ISB in general. Talk about something, maybe use this as an opportunity to showcase your skill sets on your proactiveness towards doing something new at ISB, or doing something which exists at ISB in a new manner. Maybe that is something that you would want to do at ISB, etc. But at the same time, do not like, I've also had instances wherein, just for the sake of showing that we are very proactive, candidates come up with very random ideas. For example, very recently someone told me that they want to start a luxury brand sort of club at ISB. While that's a great idea, but there was no reason as to why they want to do it. How is it going to help the cohort? Why is there a need for starting something like this? Obviously, if something does not exist at ISB, there's a reason as to why it has not been existed. And unless and until you have a strong case for it, suggesting something without having a strong reason or rationale for it probably does not make sense. So I think, in my opinion, to sort of summarize, your answer should reflect research. Your answer should reflect some sort of strength of yours, like proactiveness or some willingness to start new initiative, etc. But at the same time, also communicate a sense of how is it going to be beneficial to the ISB community in general. That is what a good question would be, in my opinion.
Okay. Counter to both of you, now that we want everybody to do their research on the website, talk to alums, consultants, etc., etc., and these are alums only sitting there. Can is it mandatory to ask the question? Can I say that I have researched at this level whatever I had to? I've spoken with alums, I've spoken with the adcom, I've attended all the webinars, I've gone through the website. I currently do not have any questions. How's that strategy?
See, Manan, to me, that's not a good strategy. I'll tell you why. One, I think if you have no questions, then you come across as somebody who's probably not done his research or her research, right? Or if you were to tell me that I spoke to alums and blah blah, and I know this, then probably in that short span of 2 minutes, you come across as somebody who's Mr. Know It All. कि बॉस मुझे तो सब पता है, मुझे तुमसे कुछ पूछना नहीं है, ठीक है तो okay, bye bye, right? That's not the way to look at it in my view. I think there is so much to discover at ISB, and I'm all three of us have been through that journey. The first month you don't even realize what hit you, right? Which means that despite everything that's out there about ISB on the website or other forums, through alums, through YouTube, whatever, there is still so much that you can ask or think about or ask about in the in that interview, right? So to me, either end is not good. Being know it all is not good, and showing that lack of homework, lack of research is also not good. So there has to be a question, but then, like Umang said, don't ask a question which doesn't really have a rationale behind it. So yeah, it's not an easy one, I understand, but I think everybody goes through the process, and I'm sure you can come up with a good question as well. But don't ask just for the sake of it. Ask if you really want to ask or are interested in an area, and hence ask that question, or put forward that question to the panel.
Fair, fair. Umang, you have anything to add on that?
I think Abhishek covered it all, but just to add one more thing. So, while this is a good opportunity as well, so it also reflects to me that this candidate is not grabbing the opportunity which has been given. So, why not do that? And actually, I feel like this is not just true for ISB interviews in general, but all interviews in general typically end on this note. And you should always utilize this opportunity, because why not? That is also the question, that why not utilize something which has been given to you and you can use it to your advantage. So why would you not do that and miss out on that opportunity is also something that you should think about.
Okay, sounds good. All right, and now final question, and again, a lot of people essentially have mentioned and asked in general that what is the flow of the interview, right? So essentially, as you can see, for all three of us, the flow was different. Now, a few might say that the interviews always start with "tell me something about yourself." That is not the case. They will straight away maybe jump into your goals just to put you off, throw you off guard. They could straight away focus on one very small aspect of your application, or they could say, tell us something about yourself that is not in the resume. So there is no typical structure of or flow of questions, unlike foreign schools where they would give you an opportunity to talk about yourself. There is not a lot of conversation. It's a set of questions that they prepared in advance. But for ISB interviews, there is no structure per se. These are elements that they cover, and they can cover it in any order. Having said that, the how to introduce ourselves becomes a very very important uh, tool to drive the interview forward. It is not just a reverse chronological or a chronological order of events that comes in from I did this in school, I did that in school. I want, what would better is to give certain snippets of information there where they'll pick up that thread and go deep into that, and that is how you drive the interview forward. There's no other way, because you lead them to those questions, right? Let's say, I talk about the fact that I graduated from college X, and where I, learned a lot of things through the activities that I was there, and it was the best learning experience of my life. And then you move on to other things, and then they will be compelled to ask you, Acha, tell me what happened there. And that is when you can drive things forward. All right. Let's move on to the Q&A now. And there have been a bunch of questions that have come in here. We have a few questions that came in through, the form as well. And you can keep on asking questions, and we are here till the time all questions are answered. So let's then start, and there is no, random order like the verification mails that you get. So let's talk about in terms of YLP interviews where people was asking. I don't think these are YLP interview dates. In the past, ISB has sort of backdated or changed the timelines of YLP interviews, primarily because the PGP ones are a little more time bound because they need to roll out the results, and the batch is starting in April. So there might be a delay in the YLP interviews that happen. So this schedule, we don't think it is for YLP because the mails that we got said it is for PGP interviews. So unfortunately, there is not a lot of clarity right now. you can talk to the ISB admissions team to get further clarity. Okay. Now, Umang, there's a question I would, kind of direct it at you because you had a product management background. So, to focus on the preparation for somebody who already is into product management and the goals would be for product management going forward, what are the two or three tips that you would give to this person?
Sure. So I was in a very similar boat where I came from a product management background and I wanted to get into product management as well. So I think some tips are whatever work you've done in product management, you should be absolutely thorough. By that I mean not just in terms of what you've done, but you should be able to explain it as a product manager. How did you identify user need? What was the user need? What did you do to solve that? What was the impact in terms of what metrics you were monitoring? So, the key product terminology should come across in your answers. And as a product manager, you should be able to explain your projects very, very well. That is the number one thing. Number two, be familiar with a lot of typical product case studies, right? For example, we all know that the most common question which is asked in product interviews is, what is your favorite product? So expect those sort of questions to come in ISB interviews as well, wherein they can ask you about these questions as well. Uh, Last, I think, expect a case study. So they will throw a random case study at you, wherein they will ask you to come up with they will give you a product, or they will ask you as to this is the product, or this is what you need to solve for. Explain to us as to how will you improve this product, or they can give an example of a very common like WhatsApp type of product as well. So be prepared and do certain practice questions. We have all those resources available via these free websites, etc. Go through it and be in a position to be able to tackle any case study then and there. Eventually also understand that they're not looking for the right answer, but they're looking for someone who can sort of have a very structured approach, break down a complicated vague problem into simpler parts, and then sort of know how to solve it in a very generic product management perspective. So I think these are the top three must do's for anyone who is applying for a product sort of role and a product interview specifically at ISB.
Thanks, Umang. The next question is from Tejas. So he's a backend engineer for a backend researcher for a consulting firm, EU applicant. What kind of technical questions can they ask since the work is pretty generic and there's no expertise for now? Abhishek, your thoughts?
Sure. I think they can ask you more about your work. So I'm sure even if it is back-end research, there would be some area that you would be researching on, right? It could be around a sector or a function, right? Like it could be around marketing, or it could be around healthcare, it could be around financial services or telecom or whatever, right? So whatever you've mentioned in your application, they would go deeper into that. So they will double click on maybe a project that you've spoken about, or that section of job responsibilities and achievements. They'll ask you to give more details on that. So it might not necessarily be very very technical in nature, but it would just be a double click on your own experience that you mentioned in the application. So don't worry too much about, oh, will they ask me very technical question which a PhD in this field is supposed to know. No, the answer is not that. The answer is to ensure that whatever you have mentioned in your application, you should know it in and out, right? If you have claimed something that, oh, I did this in my project, and there is a term that is mentioned, you just have to talk about that. So if, for example, you're talking about, say, telecom, they may ask you about, okay, what was the which market did you cover, what were the trends in telecom in that market, what do you, and hence what do you think of the Indian telecom market, etc. More around you, the work you have done and the projects that you have mentioned on your application, than really getting into technical stuff which you are not really expected to know.
Right. Thanks, Abhishek. There's a question that I have experience in consulting and manufacturing, but field for product management. I'm assuming your goals are product management. Should you also prepare for PM questions? Short answer, yes. They would want you to have an opinion around things in terms of products and the kind of case questions that Umang asked for. But at the same time, they might not expect you to know everything in detail, but the basic understanding of what is the product management life cycle, what kind of companies there are, etc., would be definitely asked. And specifically in your case, if you have experience in consulting and manufacturing, PM sounds like, again, from a high level, a far fetched goal, because right now there are undergrad, or sorry, who've done their graduation, people are getting into as APMs and already, and these are tech folks and who have a tech background in their work as well. So be prepared to answer why PM is your goal in specifically your case, Akshay. Next is, my undergrad college was tier three. How can I overcome that thing? Clearly, remembering vines. Essentially, that is something that you can't change, right? What you've done in that college matters a bit more. Yes, you might lose certain points because of the brand, but that's not a make or break. It should be about, one, what you've done in college, despite it being a tier three college, what you've done in your work since then, and of course your GMAT, GRE, and how you project your application. And that's very, very important. Just being from a tier three college does not disqualify you. So, and the second thing is, you cannot change that. What you can change is your test score and how you present the application now. So that's all about it. um, so, Umang, is it possible not to have an absolute clarity of distant future in terms of a long term goal, and how many years would define as a long term?
I would say that first of all, I would say that every candidate must have written something or the other in the application as well as a long-term goal. So I mean, there is some sort of directional clarity there which has been provided already, and you should sort of stick to that clarity and that direction that you've taken. I agree that it is on a practical life basis. It's not very like we a lot of times we do not have absolute clarity of what we want to do in the next 10 years, etc. But from an ISB perspective, I believe that you should directionally know where you want to go. For example, if you are saying that your short-term goal is to end up with a job in product management from ISB, you know directionally that that is a direction that after 10 years you want to become, say, a partner at a product management company in one of the top firms, or if you want to become an entrepreneur, you should have that sort of clarity directionally. Minute things or detailing or depth of it as to what you want to do and how you want to do it maybe can be worked out later. But I believe from an ISB interview perspective, it is important to have that directional clarity for long term. And in my opinion, anything around 10 years or above is considered as long term from an ISB interview perspective as well.
Yeah, and understand this, guys. Your short term goal should also be a step towards that. Okay, and let's face it. We are sitting right now in September. Your interviews might be in October or November. Right now, as we speak, the placement portal is open for the current class. The resumes are done, and they would be applying for jobs. So it's less than 1 year to kind of at least have an opinion on what you want to do in the short term and how it leads to a long term goal for you. Now, of course, things change. Everybody knows that, but you're right now taking a lifelong decision to apply to a B school, spending 40 plus lakh rupees, an opportunity cost of your job. ISB should and does expect a bit of clarity. At least the alums who are sitting in the interview do, in terms of, you're making such a big decision. Why are you doing it? Right? And things change. Everybody knows that. But going in, at least there has to be a path chalked out at a high level on what is the long term goal. Of course, there'll be cross questions on that. If you say you want to become an entrepreneur later, what field do you want to specialize in? What kind of entrepreneur would you be, etc., etc. And at the same time, you know the research is important, at least for a short term goal. If you want to be a product manager, at least have clarity in B2B or B2C that you want to do, what kind of products you want to work on. If you that's my go to question. If you were given an opportunity to pick up any job in any company that you would wish for, what would that be? And that to me is my short term goal. That is the level of clarity I would expect from a prospective student. Because let's face it, you're buying a mobile phone, you would compare it at five different websites: Samsung versus OnePlus versus Apple, in case you want to migrate. Of course, Apple folks will not never come to the Android side, But the idea is for a 40,000 rupee thing, you're researching so much. I'm sure you should do a bit more for buying or getting something for 40 lakhs. Yeah. Uh, and then Abhishek, could not having a LinkedIn profile be a hurdle in any way, despite having good scores, decent profile?
Well, I don't know where this question is coming from. I mean, has ISB asked for your LinkedIn profile? I don't think so. And doesn't matter. I mean, I know a lot of people who are not active on social media. I mean, I have never had an Instagram account. I have a friend Dhruv who's never been on LinkedIn while he works with Accenture and Deloitte, etc. So doesn't matter. I mean, where is this question coming from? Probably too much of social media these days. Guys, let's be honest, ISB is interested in you, not your social media presence. Yes, they might be engaging in background checks, which may include social media, but it is not a prerequisite. At least they haven't mentioned any eligibility criteria. So please do not worry about not having a LinkedIn profile. And there are many people, like I mentioned, the case of my friend, doesn't matter, just doesn't matter. So don't worry about it.
Yeah. Okay. So, Abhishek, back to you again. So, in case somebody who's already into consulting, so what kind of questions they can expect?
See, obviously, there'll be double clicks on the projects that you've done that you've mentioned in your application. So be very thorough. Who was the client? What was the problem? What were the recommendations? What was the process? What was the analysis that you did? All of that has to be there. Plus, there might be a case study that they may ask you a case question just to understand your uh, just to understand your readiness for management consulting. Okay, you might not be coming from a management consulting background, but if you say that I want to get into management consulting or strategy consulting, are you really up for it? Do you have that kind of thought process? And that might be very easily judged through a case study or a guesstimate, and that is what you can expect if you're talking about consulting in your application.
Makes sense, Abhishek. Well, this is an interesting one. You know, as I mentioned, you should be clear about the goals, right, and the kind of companies you want to work with. What if they say the companies that might recruit you for short-term goal do not come to ISB campus? Uh, Clear answer is that while you are coming for career switch, starting to work, ISB is not a placement school. It's not a placement portal. It is not a placement prep company or anything else. It is a long term investment. It is not just to get you a job and maybe a 20-30% bump in your current salary, and especially if you're experienced. So clear answer is that yes, you would want those companies to visit ISB, but if they're not, then you will be tapping into the same ISB network to get those companies either on board, or you might be applying outside of campus, and a lot of people do that, and they get jobs. So it's absolutely okay to mention certain companies if you truly believe in the goal that you want, because ISB is just not about placements. Right? For me, for instance, I wanted to get into a private equity fund right after ISB, and by this age I would have had my own fund. Clearly I did not secure a job in private equity, and clearly absolutely I do not have a PE fund or close to that amount of money to launch one. So it's absolutely okay to be clear about these companies, and they might not come to ISB. It's absolutely fine. However, ISB should not think that they cannot place you. And that goes back to the fact that how tangible or practical your goals are. Now, if you've been working in manufacturing for the past 7 years and you say, I want to get into investment banking, of course, there'll be a red flag. In the alums also, they'll basically ask you to chalk out a path and you'll not be able to answer that. So it has to be a logical progression from what you've been doing at a certain experience range, 5 7 8 years of experience. You either switch a function or you switch a sector. You cannot really switch both that easily, whereas for somebody with 2 or 3 years of experience, it is a lot more fungible and you can still do that. Okay. uh, for reapplicants, Umang, does your performance in the previous interview impact your current interview, and what should a reapplicant focus on for the interview?
I think the reapplicant, the questions that are also thrown for the reapplicant are more on the lines of how have you improved, and even the essay sort of the application also points to the improvement because you've been through the cycle, you've been through the journey. So they will also try and understand in the interview in terms of what are the parameters that you improved on. Did you do some extra effort when you know you got a reject? And did you do some extra effort of maybe reaching out to alums or maybe reaching out to an admissions committee and getting feedback and then sort of proceeding in the manner to incorporate that feedback? So that is, I think, one thing that the candidate should definitely focus on, that the answer should reflect some sort of introspection, some sort of growth and learning in the attitude and in the application and in the interview. The next thing also is there's a lot of focus and a lot of questions on what makes you so interested in ISB that you're coming back again, and what happens in a situation wherein now you get rejected, because honestly, ideally, it's not very practical that if you've been rejected once and now if you get rejected twice, would you again seriously apply next year or not? It's not very practical. So they will try and understand from you as to what you will do in that situation. What made you so keen and so enthusiastic about ISB that you're coming again this year? And will you come again next year? Or what is the plan in case, ISB does not work out this year? So what will happen? Have you applied to other B schools? Or, what is your take on that entire aspect? It might not work out. What is the plan B in that case? So I think these are things which a reapplicant should definitely focus on having answers for. Other than that, I think everything else remains more or less same in terms of what you've done, your projects. Everything else more or less remains same. But I think yes, definitely there is more focus on these aspects because they also know that mostly things have remained same. There's only so much you can do in those months of buffer that you've gotten, the duration you've gotten. So I think these are primarily what you should focus on. Whether your previous interview impacts your current interview, I'm not really sure. Probably Manan Abhishek can answer that part a little more better. I'm not really very sure of that angle.
Yeah. So first of all, from an application standpoint, ISB usually does not refer to your previous application, but they do reserve the right to. It is not 100% that they will not, but most cases they do not. If you're a reapplicant, like Umang said, they will ask you what changed. They will ask you plan B. However, it is not to be construed that ISB is not a reapplicant friendly school. We've had people in the past who have applied 3 times or 4 times and they have gotten through. But more importantly, that why aspect has to be very, very clear. And what has changed in your profile, those two things are definitely a must, do for you to prepare on. And if you are applying for 3 times, ISB feels that yes, you're ready, you want to be the school, but it should not sound like a desperation. It should sound like a logical move to get into the school and whatever your career path might be after that. Yeah. Um, then there is a question on, yeah, Abhishek, you can answer that. I got laid off 2 months back, yet applied with a low GRE score. I've been trying to get clients for building their website, but I haven't succeeded. So how should I tackle this?
So this is related to the ISB interview, right? I mean, uh, see, firstly, layoffs are pretty common these days. For the last 1 year, we've seen not only in India but across the globe, there have been right sizing initiatives by various organizations, right? So, firstly, don't get worried that oh, layoff ho gaya to ab kya hoga. It is fine, it's part and parcel of a corporate career, and it's okay. So that's the first thing. Secondly, low GRE, I don't know what the score is, but if it is low in your opinion, and you always have the average scores available on the website for the recent batches, please go ahead and try to retake and improve your score because a low GRE will not help. Thirdly, if you are trying to get clients, which tells me that you're trying to either freelance or do your own thing, startup or whatever, and if you haven't succeeded, it's okay, you will succeed in the future. But yeah, I think all of this can make for a very good resilience story. So yeah, like they say, when life gives you lemon, please make lemonade. try to spin it around in a positive way. Okay, just showcase that this phase of your life there were challenges, but you were able to overcome, and how did you overcome. I think that would make for a very good resilient story. But yeah, Sharat, please don't worry about it. It happens with a lot of people. You're not the only one, and hopefully things will be fine in the recent future, in the coming future. Yeah.
Right, makes sense. And more importantly, you should have still a plan in terms of how you're planning to get back into the game. And if you're not working right now, it is not to say that if you're applying to ISB, I should not work till April. That will then impact your placements also in some sense, because it will be almost 9 to 10 months of a gap, which you can essentially bridge through either the projects or finding a job. So continue to strive for one. That's all we'll say. Um, uh, how to answer questions around why ISB and not any American school or an IIM. Again, comparing ISB to a American school is apples and oranges. Let's face it, ISB is still a regional school. If you want to be in India, it's still the best B school in the country. If you say I want to work in America post MBA, then ISB might not be the best choice. Yes, you might get placed, but that's not the go-to for anybody I would recommend. Okay, so ISB is a regional school. Any American school, beyond the rank 20 are regional themselves. Same is the case with, let's say, a Rotman in Canada or a Schulich in Canada. So clearly, it should be about then, making a career, or at least in the short term, in that particular country when it comes to ISB versus any school outside India. If you look at an IIM, and I'm assuming you are 4 or 5 plus years of experience, there it gets a bit interesting. Again, it depends on your goals. It depends on the kind of diversity you expect in the ecosystem. It also depends on how comfortable you might be as somebody with 7, 8, or 9 years of experience working with a class which is majorly 2 to 4 years of experience, and there is almost like a generational gap right now if you're 5 years apart. So how comfortable you might be in studying with them, learning from them. However, from a placement standpoint, it should not matter, because IIMs and ISB for that experience range are comparable. So clearly it's your preference. Generally ISB is still the best B school in the country for now. However, if your preference is for smaller batches, close knit batches, etc., then IIMs, of course, will be the right choice in that case. Okay, here's an interesting one, not from an interview standpoint. Abhishek, I would want your thoughts on that. I am an MBBS MD, having served in the armed forces for 14 years, limited knowledge of business and specifically, public health. How should I approach the application on interview? More importantly, is ISB expecting this kind of profile to understand the nuances of the health landscape?
Yeah, thanks, Manan, and good question. See, firstly, let me tell you that there have been people in the past with your kind of background who've gotten. Manan, I remember in your class, Ashwini had a similar profile, right? MBBS, and serving in the defense forces, and then going on to ISB and then McKinsey and starting up on his own as well, right? So it is possible to get in, and not only just get in but do well. In terms of the approach to the application and the interview, yes, they would know that you have limited knowledge of business, and they're fine with that. Okay, they are not going to expect that you would know everything about business. If you knew everything about business, why would you go to a B school, right? So they expect you to know, one, what you did, right? So you should know everything about your experience, your initiatives and projects. Secondly, why do you want to go for an MBA at this stage of your career? I think for you that would be a very important question, and there has to be a convincing answer, right? Because you've served for 14 years, you're not coming from a business background, you're making a career switch now. So why is it, right? And that has to be very, very clear. So it's not anything new. There have been various people from medicine, from defense, and that combination as well, who have applied to ISB, got through, and done very well post ISB as well. So ISB is used to such applications, but yeah, you need to be very clear about your own expectations from the school, from the program, and what's the kind of career trajectory you are expecting post your MBA.
Thanks, Abhishek. And Doc, if I may call you that, please feel free to reach out for a profile evaluation. Let's have a chat in detail in terms of, first of all, why do you want to do an MBA? Is it the right choice for you or not? We can cover all of that. Okay. Now, Dhruv is asking, do you guys also do career consulting slash advisory? As in, if I'm a bit confused about my career direction, I would love to have inputs. Yes, we do that. So there is a sister brand of ours called Dream Compass, where we talk about all things career, from career counseling to resume preparation, job interview preparation, and specific cohort-based programs. So right now there is a consulting cohort that will start in another 20 days on the 7th of October. I'm just pasting that link for that cohort in the comments. So please feel free to go through that, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Apart from that, if you want like an hourly session on general career direction and advisory, feel free to ping me, and we'll help you set up with one of our mentors. Okay, thank you, Dhruv, for that question. Now, Divija is asking, she's a corporate lawyer, applied for YLP, aiming for investment banking. Can you expect the panel from the same background and technical questions? First part, the panel may or may not be from your background. Even if they are, they might go deep into your work. There might not be technical questions on investment banking per se, but more importantly, why do you want to switch out of your current corporate law role? Why do you want to get into M&A or investment banking? That needs to be absolutely clear. All right. Um okay. There's a question on, do you think an executive assistant working in a small private company have a chance at ISB? Absolutely. It's not just about whatever size of company that you're working in, it's about what you're doing there. And an EA specifically does a lot of things. And you can demonstrate, of course, your knowledge of business and the kind of things that you've done. It's absolutely okay to talk about it. Okay, I'm planning to take a sabbatical from my current org and join it back after ISB. Is this look positively or negatively? What kind of questions I can expect? Umang?
Sorry, yeah. So I think it's not looked at either positively or negatively. It's a very neutral lens. There have been multiple people I know in my organization which came from a sabbatical, like who had taken a sabbatical, and in fact, a lot of these consulting companies run programs in which they fund the MBA, and candidates go back to the same company after that as well. So it does happen for a lot of candidates, and it's a neutral lens because they understand that. Again, as Manan also mentioned earlier, ISB is not a placement machine or something. They are there to help you upskill. They're there to help you grow as a professional and an individual. So even though you are saying you do not want any part in placement, you will still have a lot of learning, and ISB still has a lot to offer to you. So they understand that, and they're very well okay with candidates who come with that sabbatical or that funding sort of to help them for ISB. So I think it's a very neutral sort of lens. You can expect questions, very normal questions as to what will be given to normal candidates as well. But what one thing which you can expect differently is. Why are you so sure about the current company, or the kind of passion you need to display, the kind of passion that you have towards your current work or towards your current company. That is something that should strike out, because you know what, in a practical situation happens at ISB is sometimes these people who come with a sabbatical or who have a clear intent of going back to the current company, they do get swayed because they see their batchmates applying and sitting through placements. Packages might be different, they might be same, etc., but the roles are new, roles are interesting, so there is a temptation to get swayed. So that cannot happen if you're coming on a very clear cut sabbatical or a funding from a previous company. So you have to be absolutely clear that, hey, I'm very sure that this is what I want to do, and at least I will have a 2 year, 3 year bond or whatever with my current
Yeah,
company, but I'm
yeah,
absolutely sure, and this is what I want to do. That is, I think, something that you need to be clear about.
yeah, yeah. And I think from an ISB perspective, they'll be more than happy because they have already one person placed before they start. But from an alum standpoint, who's sitting in the interview, they would want to go absolutely deep into what your motivations are. And that happened with somebody we worked with last year. His name is Harkaran. We had added the same from the firm that he was a part of, and he still got admitted. So that's not a red flag by any way. Okay. Parallelly, guys, in case you're looking for help for ISB interviews or application prep, feel free to reach out to us at Strategy for GMAT. I'm just pasting the link of the plans in the comments. We can go for a profile evaluation in case you're in an interview stage already. Look at the plans. We will have interviews with different ISB alums, different class ranges from to 2013 onwards to 2021, and it will be a fun experience in case you're looking at that. So feel free to reach out for a chat in case you want to. Uh, Moving on, there are questions that we received on the form as well. These were the ones that we were talking about in chat. So, if a person gets shortlisted for interview but does not get an admit, will improving a GMAT help? Absolutely, because ultimately we are looking at the criteria is such that you have an application score which includes your GMAT, essays, and everything else, and then there is a interview scores. Both the scores are combined to come up with the final score, and then whether you get an admit or not. Hence, it's not to say that in case you get an application shortlisting, that does not mean the application was perfect and there are no changes you can make in that. So, absolutely, an improved GMAT would definitely go a long way. An improved application will definitely go a long way, even if the interview went stellar. So, it's not like a cutoff where you said application shortlisted next year I can use the same application. No, that doesn't work that way. Yeah. Then, in terms of the the reapplicants per se, right? What kind of so Mang, that's a question for you in terms of reapplicants. What kind of achievement should I add in my essay and in my interview where they get a sense that I've done really really well? Does it have to be a lot of significant improvements, or there can be other things that I've done? Let's say spoke with alums, goal clarity, better essays for that matter, versus last year.
I think it has to be a mixed bag of all of these things. It has to definitely start on the point of getting feedback, working on that feedback. So I typically like to think of improvements in two ways. You should have improved in a professional manner. You should have improved in a personal manner as well. Personally, you can improve by doing small things as well. You can probably take a session. You can probably improve your skills in certain manner, etc., by attending a workshop, etc., or you've gone and started some activity or a hobby or something like that, right? That also goes a long way to show that you've improved or you've tried to step out of your comfort zone and do something. On a professional level, depending on the feedback that you got, you can, or the work that you've done, you can try and portray that you have taken a lot more initiative. You have now worked on displaying leadership skills, or showing more ownership, and give examples of that. So it does not have to be a lot in the sense of number of things, but it has to be a good quality of stuff that you've done. It has to be, again, in a personal as well as professional sense, because when you did not get a call from ISB, or when you did not get a convert from ISB, it was not just because you do not have good work, or you do not have good GMAT, etc. It could have been because of multiple reasons, and the idea is to show progress in all of these fronts, which could have been worked on. So I think that is how you should go about it.
Great, thank you. Abhishek, are we also asked to give an instance of leadership, teamwork, failure, challenges in the interviews?
Absolutely, Sarthak. I think that's a good question, and absolutely, you will be asked to give illustrations or anecdotes about your experiences where you failed, or where you were part of the team, or you were leading a team, or whatever the situation was. And as we mentioned before, it's more of a conversation. So if your previous answer suggested something on these lines, they may ask you a follow-up question to just go deeper into what you mentioned before, and give illustrations or examples of such qualities. So absolutely, I think that will happen. It does happen on various occasions, and your interview can be another such instance.
Great. We'll cover two more questions apart from the ones that are already there on chat. So feel free to basically type them out. So Question from Aditi. I'm an interior designer and an artist. Can the panel expect to see my artwork? Um, you can carry a portfolio if you really want to, and there is no harm in doing so. And you can basically show it to them. But more importantly, the discussions will revolve around why do you want to either leave this field that you're in, or how a B school will help you in terms of whatever goals you might have. Yes, it will be a good conversational starter, etc., but it won't give you any brownie points per se. And people generally who are from diverse backgrounds such as yours, they might be asked to demonstrate their skills. So last year we worked with Neha, who was an Indian Idol contestant, and in both her IIM Calcutta interviews and ISB interviews, she was asked to sing a song. So it's absolutely okay. The panel is pretty chill that way. So in case you have a portfolio that you can carry, absolutely go and showcase as the conversation goes. Don't just enter and then put it on their table. Just keep it aside. They'll ask what it is, and then you can kind of say that I got it in case you wanted it. That's about it. And of course, that's about leading the interview. They'll anyways ask you for that question. Yeah. Okay, Shubham, what is the weightage of interview in the overall score? Please state some indicative range or idea. Of course, I can't reveal the exact number. Because even admissions team does not tell the alums around it. Let's face it. And if any alum consultant or anybody is giving you the exact ranges, they are bluffing. Let's face it. Nobody knows the exact criteria. My estimates in bold, my assessment, it is anywhere between 30 to 35%. It could be more, it could be less, but it is a very significant part compared to, let's say, your hobbies in the application. Okay, essays. If I have to choose like three big elements, the essays are big, interviews definitely, and your GMAT GRE, and then the rest of the portion is how you've laid out your application form and other things, right? If I have to kind of broadly state the criteria, again, this is just my assessment. AdCom never reveals that, rightly so, and that's about it. Yeah. Okay. So final question, that is something that I've received a DM on. In terms of what should be my next, plan of action for the next 10 to 15 days, assuming the interview calls come in by then. Should I start preparing now? If yes, how should I go about it? So, Abhishek, your thoughts?
Thanks, Manan, and very good question. I think ISB would usually give you 5 to 7 days to prepare. Okay, and that, in my view, is too is not really a significant time frame to materially change anything about you or your communication, etc. Right? So if you are expecting a call, or if you've applied and you really believe that you've done a good job and you should get a call, start preparing now. There is no point waiting till that day, and just waste this time between today and that day, because every day matters. It is very competitive, and from what I understand, the success ratio at the interview stage at ISB is 1:3. So out of three people who would appear for an interview, only one would get through to the final offer stage. So what that tells you is that, and mind you, that all three of them would be very good, and it would be not easy to compete. And in India, the margins are really, really small, 1 mark, half a mark, whatever, right? I mean, it's not that kind of a competition in ISB like your IIT, JEEs, etc. But it is still very, very competitive out there, right? So please ensure that you are making the most of the time you've got. Please prepare well. Uh, Take a few mocks, with people or consultants or whatever. But practice, practice, practice. It's very important. Preempt the questions that you may be asked. And while I say that, I know that in every interview there could be surprises and there could be out of syllabus questions. But at ISB, I know that a lot of the interview would revolve around your application and your profile. So stuff like, why MBA, why you, how would you add value to the class, etc., etc. Those are run of the mill questions that will most likely be asked. So why not prepare for them well in advance and ensure that you are not panicking near the deadline, when you say, "Oh, I've got an interview in a week's time. Now, what do I do?" Right? And mind you, that if you don't do it, somebody else would already be doing it, right? So please start early, make the most of the time you've got, and ensure that you prepare well.
Thanks, Abhishek. Any final thoughts from you, Umang?
I think no. I think as Abhishek also said, overall I feel the earlier you start, the better. It's a very competitive B school, and it's not just. I mean, the kind of people that you're competing with are people in the top of their academic or professional game. So, why to waste any time? Get started as early as possible. 5 days is definitely not enough. 5 days, if you start, you will be very stuck with what to cover, how to start. It does take 2, 3 days. I would say it takes good 4 to 5 days to understand as to how to approach an interview. So definitely not enough. Get started as early as you can and start with basics in terms of revising your application, and then get started in terms of the preparation. And I think this is the right time to sort of get started.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the last 4 5 days are for just practicing it out. It will not be about a lot of approach that you can change or answers that you can write. It's more about the practice, and just make sure that you, even if you just do it and don't get the call, it will help you for your jobs and other things as well, or any other B school that you're applying to. So the effort will not go waste, even if you are seeking help and that kind of a thing. Yeah. So thank you, Abhishek and Umang, for taking out time for this session, and thank you everybody for for being such an active audience and asking a lot of questions. It was a lovely session for us. Saying it again, feel free to reach out in case you want your profile evaluated, or you want to sign up for any of the application or the interview services. We are always there to help, and then looking forward to see most of you or almost all of you on the other side, as ISB alums and future alums, and would love to know you more through that journey. So thank you so much. Have a good rest of the Sunday, and prepare well. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.